I'm a Time Lord, a man of science, temperament, and passion. I will admit it's not the best quote, but welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about Attack of the Cybermen. The credit goes to Paula Moore, but she's not actually a real person, and is directed by Matthew Robinson. Now, like I said, with the script, it's not a real person. What actually happened is Eric Saywood wrote the story. He wanted to write another story, but he couldn't credit himself, so this was actually the last time that a pseudonym was used in Doctor Who. So that's really cool to know. However, there has been some controversy as to who wrote this story, which is actually on the DVD, at least part of it, as according to Eric Saywood, he basically wrote everything. He came up with the ideas, with the stories, and he only really asked help from Ian Levine, Doctor Who's unofficial continuity advisor, to ask for some little help here and there in terms of the continuity of the Cybermen. However, Ian Levine claims that he actually came up with the basic storyline and he mapped everything out for Eric Saywood, and he believes that he should have gotten co-writer credit. So there's a bit of controversy there, and later on in life, Ian Levine actually now claims that he wrote Attack of the Cybermen, like all of it. But as far as the BBC is concerned, and as far as history is proven, Eric Saywood wrote the story. Or at least he came up with the majority of the ideas. Now, after the controversial twin dilemma in which fans were left with a very unlikable Doctor, and they had to wait for almost a year to see this new Doctor have a full season to himself, this gave John Nathan Turner a chance to basically redeem the Sixth Doctor, as he asked them to start off the season with a Cybermen story, and unlike Earthshock, have the Cybermen in the title, advertised as hell. So, and what this will do is encourage fans who like the Cybermen to basically try the show again if they didn't like Colin Baker's Sixth Doctor in the Twin Dilemma. So that, I think, was a very good choice. However, I think that with this story there's a lot of there's just so many nods to classic stories that it does become overwhelming. Now, this is actually a really popular Sixth Doctor story. A lot of people cite it as their favourite story of his, and if not, they always put it high up in Sixth Doctor storylines. And yeah, I totally agree. Though I think it does stumble in some places, which we'll get to, I do think that this is a very good story. The story starts off by seeing two people in the sewers of London, and they get attacked by a creature off screen, which is actually a really good horror moment, as we see the attacker's point of view, and it's got the digital effects, and we see him basically murdering these characters. And it's also here then that we get we then cut to the Doctor and Perry. Now, I've stated before, the Doctor Perry dynamic really didn't work on a story plot and a character plot, and really feels like Perry is in an abusive relationship here. And I'm afraid that kind of feeling does continue in Attack of the Cybermen. However, it's a lot more lighter. For example, there's a great moment when the Doctor is talking about, like, he's fixing a chameleon circuit because he wants to get it working again. which will be the first time in the show's history where the TARDIS technically works as it should do. But anyway, Perry's asking, telling him to calm down and he might be a bit unstable. We get the famous line in which would become, like, I guess you could say, the Sixth Doctor's catchphrase, where he says, like, he says a word as if he's questioning it, and then he says it again, shouting as if he's offended by its remark, where he's like, unstable, and then he kind of like calms down. He's like, I am as stable as you're going to get, Perry, but don't worry, no harm will come to you. And have a little smile at each other. So it's a lot lighter than it is in the Twin Dilemma, but it still feels off. It still feels odd. However, throughout this story, that kind of feeling dismisses, and because we don't have such an arrogant Doctor this time around, he's a lot more calmer compared to his Twin Dilemma counterpart. The relationship is passable. We can get past this. If you really want to enjoy some Sixth Doctor, you can watch this story and not forget about this issue, but you can see past it, if that makes any sense. But anyway, this story actually reintroduces Lytton, the character from Resurrection of the Daleks, who in that story we didn't really know what his deal was. In fact, I don't even remember he even meeting the Doctor. But anyway, he is now living on Earth in London, and he seems to have gained a group of thieves and criminals, and he's and basically his plan is, well, the plan he tells them is that these group of people are going to go down to the sewers, smash this wall, set off a sort of earthquake which will set all the alarms off in London, and then they can go and steal some diamonds in a diamond store or in a bank or something. And Lytton here gets a lot to do. He's buffed up to a secondary character status, and I really like Lytton in this story. He's this really cool, collective, almost gangster-like character, and one of the people on his team is actually an undercover cop played by Terry Malloy, aka Davros, in his, I believe it's his only appearance out of makeup, which is really cool. And he basically he's going after Lytton because they've heard about Lytton, this massive like crime boss basically, but he has no birth certificate, he has no record of going to school or hospital or anything. He just sort of appeared, and they were the police force was curious about him, so they hired this guy to basically go undercover in his group, and so they go into the sewers, to which, after an incident, a Cyberman kills one of the crew members and captures Lytton and his mate. Now Lytton knows that the Cybermen were there and basically offers himself as a prisoner to the Cyber leader. Cyber leader. This brings back the Cybermen from Earthshock. In fact, the Cyber leader is again played by David Banks, who just doesn't know how to give off a bad Cyberman performance. This is a story where the Cybermen are desperate and they are just in dire need of supplies, demands, and mainly human bodies, as this is actually the first time in the show's history where we actually see someone get converted, although that won't happen until a later part in the story. Now, the Doctor originally tracks a distress signal on Earth in 1985, but then he soon realises that there's some sort of relay, and he tracks it to the porthole where Lytton got into the caves. And it's here that Perry and the Doctor get attacked by two policemen, which have been revealed to be the Dalek duplicates that now work for Lytton at the end of Resurrection of the Daleks. Now, this is where I kind of have issue with this story, because these police officers, unless you watched Resurrection of the Daleks, you have no idea what the point is with these coppers, because they just seem like cops that have just basically become really evil as they threaten the Doctor and Perry with a gun, and they don't seem to say anything. So, and unless you've watched Resurrection of the Daleks, I mean, you should, it's a brilliant story, but because of that, it's kind of necessary viewing for this story, even though it's a very small part of it. It's just strange because it's such a small part, but because of it, Resurrection becomes a sort of necessary component to this story. Now, it's also here where we learn that the cyber controller is still alive and is working in Telos, the second home planet of the Cybermen. Originally appeared in Tomb of the Cybermen, here taking place like many years before, and we get introduced to two characters who work at the minery of this of Telos, Bates and Strutton, and these characters get a lot of screen time as we see them trying to escape and try to get back into cyber control, the base of operations, so they can fly a ship to get off Telos, because the Cybermen plan to basically explode Telos when they're finished with it. And we also learn about the history of Telos, that originally it was the home planet of the Cryons, but the Cybermen invaded their planet because they have great refrigeration technology, so they can hibernate, and so the Cybermen basically invaded Telos and took over their home planet. We also get to learn basically the Cybermen's plan, as they plan to use, because basically they've stolen a time machine. They don't know how it really works, but they don't know how it works, but they've got their hands on a time machine, and so the Doctor has to go and stop them, and Lytton turns out to be later on revealed to be working for the Cryons to stop the Cybermen from using their time machine. Now, the Cybermen's plan is to go back in time, which I believe this is when they're back in time, because Mondas being destroyed is an element of this plot, in which the Cybermen have gone back in time to 1985 to stop the destruction of Mondas in 1986, the story of the 10th planet, the first Doctor's last story. So with that, I'm going to have to talk about one of my issues with this story. This story is really heavy on continuity references, especially with Cybermen. Some of them I actually really like the sewers, the Cybermen working in the sewers is a reference to the invasion. However, the ones at Telos and their whole plot about stopping Mondas seems a lot like the references came first and they wrote the plot around that. And because of that, I think the story might be a bit harder for newcomers. If you don't really know about some of the Cybermen stories, these little moments won't give you a kick, and some bits really, I think, really need their previous stories. For example, the cyber controller who originated from Tomb of the Cybermen returns, and they actually got the same actor to play him, which is really cool until you realise that this was at least 20 years after. The guy who plays him has now got, let's be honest, put on a little bit of weight, and he plays the Cyberman as he did back then, with a lot of robot movement and doing this, and only like moving like bits of his arms at the time, like. But the rest of the Cybermen don't act like that, and every time we put him on screen, it feels like it was really undermined, and we don't really understand the threat of the cyber controller. I also am not a huge fan of the redesign. They basically redesigned him so he looks like the Cybermen of the 80s era, you know, with the chunky boots and the you know, the 80s Cybermen look. But they've taken the handlebars off and replaced it with his brain basically popping out, which always reminds me of yogurt for some reason. But anyway, and I think with this design, with that idea of the Cybermen brain being a massive part of it, it looks really stupid. And what I think is a massive issue is, again, with the cyber controller, because we have the cyber leader as well. The cyber leader was the main Cyberman in Earthshock, played by David Banks, and he was in that story the best Doctor Who villain in my opinion, by far. He pushes the Doctor to his limits. He knows exactly when to push his buttons and how to control him, and he basically wins his debate. From his point of view, you can kind of see that from his point of view, he wins the debate on if emotions are a weakness or not. Now, he returns in this story, again played by David Banks, and he does a fantastic job. He doesn't have a lot to do in terms of the plot, but he gets some really great scenes, especially earlier on when he basically interrogates Lytton and his co-worker, and he basically just crushes the other guy's head like that. It's like, silence, or I will destroy you. And when Lytton talks to him about how he could have given away the Cybermen's location, but he didn't because he wants to work for them, he wants to help them. We get the iconic, there is logic in what he says, which if you're a fan of Link Cara, he uses that clip a lot. And we also get some really great moments in which, because the cliffhanger for part one, I forgot to mention, this is a two-part adventure. This is the first story in a new style of Doctor Who, where instead we have around about 25, 26, 25-minute episodes. Now we have 13 45-minute episodes. More similar now to new series Doctor Who. And here, basically they have 2 episodes of 45 minutes. And I think for this story, that pacing really works well. It helps you smoother out some of the more character moments of Lytton and Bates and Strutton. And it's, you know, I just think it really works. But anyway, the cliffhanger for part one is the Doctor realising that it's Cybermen after being introduced to a Cyberman painted black in the caves, not in the caves, in the sewer, sorry, where he attacks and kills one of them. These black Cybermen look really cool, and I wish we had a better look at them because they're only in there in the background really. But anyway, when the Doctor realises that Cybermen are involved, he asks Perry and the copper to run back to the TARDIS. I forgot to mention one of my favourite scenes in which the Doctor and Perry basically find this undercover cop as he ran away when the Cybermen attacked Lytton and his goons. And the Doctor basically tells Perry to point the gun at him. And when the Doctor doesn't like his answer, he basically bluffs doing the good cop, bad cop, and he tells Perry to shoot him, but he doesn't tell Perry that this is just to him to push him to tell him what he wants to know. And so Perry's just like, what? You want me to kill him? That bit is actually really good. That actually works to the Doctor's and Perry's relationship. But anyway, they head back to the TARDIS, where it's been invaded by Cybermen. and the cyber leader takes no risks. Just as they capture everybody, they automatically threaten Perry's life, putting the Doctor in his mercy, like he did with Tegan in Earthshock. And that's our cliffhanger, with the cyber leader basically is like, destroy her at once. And that is a really good cliffhanger. That is just a really, really good cliffhanger. So Cyber Leader basically takes control of the Doctor. It's here where the Doctor bumps into Lytton and his co-worker, call him his co-worker then. And it's here that we learn about the Cybermen's plan of invading time and stuff. And then we get a bit more plot with Bates and Strutton, and I really like these two characters. One of them is he's very, I like the line where he's like, just like you, this planet really depresses me. And he gets really shouty, he's very angry, but you can understand where his point of view is, because he is so stressed and he's been tortured by the Cybermen and he just wants to get off. Whereas the other one, Strutton, he's a sort of coward in a way. He hesitates, he gets fearful, he panics. And these two characters really bounce off each other, really in like a comedic way. And they have a mission to basically get to cyber control, disguising one of them as a Cyberman to get onto the ship so that they can fly off and leave Telos. Now, later on, when the Doctor arrives on Telos, he lands them in the chamber of the tombs, where there is a rogue Cyberman, a Cyberman whose circuitry has gone wrong and starts attacking everybody in a really great scene in which the cyber leader basically is like, this is the wrong place, and he slaps the Doctor, smashing him like down the corridor, only for one of the Cybermen's heads to just burst open, which causes a distraction which allows Lytton and his co-worker to escape, meeting the Cryons, and then getting introduced to Bates and Strutton and help their plans to try and take a time vessel so that the Cybermen won't be able to time travel again. Because the Cryons, though they don't want the Cybermen there, they've basically accepted their fate. So they basically want to keep the Cybermen on their planet. Now here's what I'm on about in terms of the Cyber Leader. He gets some really great bits with the Sixth Doctor, in which he's shouting, and we get a lot of bits where he's pushing the Doctor. There's bits where like he's in the TARDIS and he's like, excellent, and he just backhands the Sixth Doctor into the wall, and he gets really aggressive towards Colin Baker. But his threat, his demeanour is kind of underlined by the fact that in this story, he's not in command. He is basically a henchman in this story to the cyber controller, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But the cyber controller here just rants and just feels really out of place. And because of that, they kind of out-demeanor each other, because you've got the henchman who works for the big bad, but the big bad is just not as interested as the cyber leader. I mean, how to fix this story? Easy. Don't use the cyber controller. Just have David Banks, cyber leader, make him the boss, end of story. That's all you need. So anyway, Perry actually gets captured by a few Cryons as they basically explain that Lytton was working for them and that Lytton was actually a good guy in this story. And we get a really, it's like Perry's like confused and it's like, I don't understand. Now let's talk about the Cryons. They are a great counter to the Cybermen. Where the Cybermen are bulky and manly, the Cryons are gentle and feminine in their appearance and the way they speak. But that doesn't mean they're specifically innocent. as one of them even brings up the idea of killing Perry so that they don't have to explain everything, so they could just get on with their work. But they have a great contrast to the Cybermen, and they have this idea of they can't exist below 0 temperatures. If they go up in higher temperatures, they will burn to death, which becomes a great part in the Sixth Doctor's storyline, in which he gets put in a cabin with a Cryon who helps the Doctor because there's a room full of explosions. Now, there's a little bit of a nitpick, but why did the Cybermen put the Doctor in a room full of explosives? That's like the dumbest idea I've ever heard. But anyway, it's here where the Doctor learns about the main plot of the time traveling aspects of the Cybermen, and that they plan to change time. And the Doctor's like, the Time Lords would not allow it. They won't allow anybody to change time. And then the Cryon basically points out, maybe they've already have sent their agents, we never know. And the Doctor's like, yes. And then he clicks. Something clicks in it, and he's like, no! No! It would have helped if you would have told me what I was getting into. Yes, it turns out, or at least, I don't know if it's confirmed, maybe it's just a huge coincidence, but it seems to imply that the Time Lords actually put the Sixth Doctor on this mission without letting him know about the Cybermen. And so the Sixth Doctor has basically got to be the one that saves time in this adventure, as he lets out his burst, and he gives this Cryon a device, the Sonic Lance, a successor to the Sonic Screwdriver, which was destroyed in the Visitation. This would be its only appearance. And it looks really cool. I really wish we got to see more of the Sonic Lance. But anyway, it gets destroyed in this story as the Cryon basically uses it to warm up this explosive that they have. And the Doctor tries to go and escape and save Perry, to which he finds the other Cryons and saves Perry. But Perry's like, no, we've got to save Lytton. And the Doctor's like, why not? You'd be glad to keep with the Cybermen. And this is where Perry tells the Doctor that, you don't understand, he was working for the Cryons, he was a good guy all along. The Doctor's like, what? And he talks to the Cryon, he's like, I'll see what I can do. And then he walks off. Now, Lytton gets captured by the Cyberman as Bates, Strutton and Lytton's co-worker get near to the base. They're literally this close, and they're like, right, we're able to escape. But one of them touches the door and basically electrocutes to death, as the other two get shot down by Cybermen. They fail. They lose. They didn't succeed in their plans, and it makes you have it brings up the dark themes of this story, as not everybody wins and not everybody gets judged accordingly. Lytton gets tortured by the cyber controller by having 2 Cybermen with robot arms, mind you, crushing his hands, leaving Lytton bloodied on the floor. And the controller's like, convert him! And when the Doctor comes into the cyber controller's room, he finds Lytton half cyber converted, and Lytton's like, kill me, please, Doctor. And the Doctor's like, no, after what I've learned about you, I'm going to rescue you. I'm going to do as best as I can. And then this is where we get the confrontation between the Sixth Doctor and the cyber controller, in which Lytton, hiding a knife which the Doctor gave him, stabs him in the shoulder as the Doctor grabs their gun and shoots as many Cybermen coming into the room, and basically has Lytton dying in his arms as Perry comes out and is like, come on, Doctor, there's nothing we could do. We need to get back to the TARDIS. The TARDIS now turned back into its regular police box form. So the whole idea of the TARDIS chameleon circuit being fixed doesn't really play a part in the story. It just seems like a random aspect of this adventure, just a little bit extra for the sakes of time, I guess. So that's very strange. There's nothing to do bearing with the plot, really. And then we get a scene in which the cyber leader, he finds the Cryon in the cell, in the bit with all the explosives, and he's like, "Where is the doctor? How long has he gone?" And when the Cryon doesn't give him a good answer, he basically tortures her by pushing her out into the corridor, which is in room temperature, to which she starts basically steaming up, and she tries to get her back into the room, but the cyber leader just stands there in her way without even like flinching, showing just how cool and just how deadly the cyber leader is compared to the cyber controller. But anyway, as the Doctor escapes, the base of the cyber control basically gets destroyed, saving the day, and we get a bittersweet moment in which Perry's like, "We saved the day," and then the Doctor's like, "Yes, but I don't think I've ever misjudged someone, and I have, Lytton." We end on that bittersweet note as the credits roll. And that's Attack of the Cybermen. I did kind of brush over a few things. I didn't even mention that at the start of the story, the Doctor finds himself in Totter's Lane, in the same junkyard, despite it looking completely different. And like I said, I didn't really explain much about the TARDIS changing in this story, as it changes into an organ at one point, which is really cool. And I kind of skipped over a lot of things, but I feel this video is going a bit too far. But anyway, Attack of the Cybermen. It's a really good story. It has some really great moments. Oh, I forgot to talk about the music as well, which I want to talk about. The music, there are two types of tracks in this story. There are some music that's been reused from Attack of the Cybermen, giving the Cybermen a theme, if you will, their own theme as the Cybermen march. A track from Earthshock gets repeated here. But we also get some really new music, and the new music really doesn't work. We get this really silly tune, and it just doesn't work, and it just really takes you out of the adventure every time this track is played. But anyway, back to the overall. The story is great. It has a great theme, it has a great dynamic. The Sixth Doctor becomes kind of likable at the end of it, as we get into the more of the threat. His relationship with Perry kind of comes a bit more straightened up, and he gets more relaxed. And when we see him doing his best to try and save Lytton, and him remorsing by the fact that he misjudged Lytton, which is completely different to how he reacted to betrayal in the Twin Dilemma, in which he would just let someone die just because they annoyed him. So here we get a much more classical rendition of the Doctor, which kind of still keeps Sixth Doctor's bombasticness. And I must be honest, I actually really like the Sixth Doctor here. It's kind of like, when I say Perry sticks around because the Fifth Doctor was so sweet and she's kind of bringing him back, I think another element is that it's like the Sixth Doctor is suffering from some sort of ADHD and is having issues basically expressing himself, and he doesn't know how to, so that's why he shouts and graveling. And Perry kind of sticks on board because she knows that she kind of understands that this doctor is struggling with his personality and his emotions, and that's why he keeps around. Or at least that's the impression I got in this story. I'm sorry about that glare. But anyway, so I really like that here. However, I think it goes a bit too overboard in referencing other stories. This would be a trend which I think Stephen Moffat would also, as a crutch, that Stephen Moffat would also get into, in just making stories around continuity references. And that does kind of feel like it here, as we get a reference to a classic story every few minutes. And with the Cybermen, though they are very well handled here, and it's actually one of the few times in which we actually see a conversion, or at least partially converted person. The dynamic between the cyber controller and the cyber leader really underlines the both of them and makes you wish that they got rid of one of them to tighten up the story. So there you go, that's Attack of the Cybermen. So join me next time where the Sixth Doctor and Perry fight one of the most greatest enemies, television. And they meet one of the Sixth Doctor's greatest foes, a slug. So join me next time for vengeance on Varos. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da!